And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 444. I have a returning guest to the show, a great NFBC player. She now writes for RotoBaller.com for Fantrax HQ. She's just all over the podcast world right now. If you listen to a fantasy baseball podcast, you have heard of this person. You can find her on Twitter at Jenny Butler 830. Jenny, how we doing?
I'm good. How are you? Have I saturated the market yet? I think it's close.
You're doing well though, because it's like one a week where you're not like on the full, like the old ESPN joke, we're doing the car wash going on every show like in 2 days type thing. You're at least spacing it out a little bit, which is good. So you might have oversaturated the Justin Mason market, but there's nothing you can do about that.
That was all him. I said, "You really want me to come on both of your podcasts in a 1 week span?" And he said, "Yeah, let's do it." All right, if that's what you want.
I have to get at least one Justin Mason jab in on every one of my episodes. It's just part of the deal. I text him, and we're buddies like that.
As we know, he's very trollable. So
yes, but he's also he takes it well, and he does dish it out. He's not so much on Twitter, but if he has your phone number, he will text you. So that does happen.
Good to know. I'll make sure that doesn't happen.
Yes, so he is good in that regard. If you want to get random pictures of him and his women's swimsuit, those will be sent to you. No, neither did I. Trust me, they're not wanted. They just show up. So that is what happens. But it's great to have you on. It's been great to hear you everywhere, because I got to meet you. I had the pleasure to meet you at First Pitch Arizona, and that was fun to kind of get to meet the person instead of just talking on Twitter. And I had you on the show with Rob last year, but it's been good to get to know you a little more, and but like between podcasts, in person, and whatnot. So before we get started with all that blabbering, launch let everybody know like kind of what you have going on, where you're writing, what you got going on draft wise. Like what's going on in Jenny's world right now?
So I started out my writing career this off season with the FTN 5-tool fantasy draft guide, and that went pretty well. It took me a while to sort of get it all together. I don't know how fast other people write, but it turns out I'm not that fast. So I finally just also got myself together to do an article for RotoBaller. So that just came out yesterday, I think. An article on best ball strategy. And I've got something that I'm working on for Fantrax, and hopefully I'll work some to get stuff out for both RotoBaller and Fantrax during the season. But for the most part, I'm just on Twitter, Jenny Butler 830. And right now, I just draft-wise, I just wrapped up a Dynasty supplemental draft and a best ball auction. Filling out the snake rounds of the best ball auction. And then just TGFBI. That's all I've got going as of today.
How is TGFBI going? Are you in the slow drafts, the fast drafts? How's your draft going?
It's going pretty slow. I just made my 10th round pick, and I immediately regretted it. So that's where we are.
That's part of the problem. Like we've been doing so many slow drafts, and they're great because for the reasons like if you don't have time to sit down and do it, like I get the whole purpose of them. They make sense. But after you do so many of them, you just kind of like you need to just go to the real deal, because you start overthinking things because you've done so many drafts, and it's like, should I take someone else just to be different, even though I know it's not the right player, or should I do this or that? And we only have ourselves to blame. But I feel you there. I'm totally with you. And I'm on like the turn, and like one half of the drafts goes really fast, the other half goes really slow. So I'm like making a couple picks a day. Some days I make 4, some days I make 2. Just depends. And it's just those go bang bang, and I just kind of wait around all day. And just see what's going on.
We had time out in the first round, so that was fun.
I thought we were gonna have all heck breaking loose, because our very first person on the clock like almost got to the first hour, and I'm like, no, do not do this to me. And they're like at like 110 they picked. I'm like, thank God. Because I'm like, we can't clock out the very first pick. This is not going to happen. So
yeah.
Oh, fun stuff. But with I don't want to talk a lot about the delay in games. I know we will, is because we all hate this so much, and we want to play fantasy baseball. We want just regular baseball because we are baseball fans at heart. But with the kind of what's going on, is this going to change your volume at all? Obviously, it might take more games to miss to change things, but like, how are you approaching this potential like month off, multiple times off? Who knows?
Well, I was kind of wrapping things up and getting ready for Vegas. I'm currently signed up for 4 drafts in Las Vegas, but I don't know. We got an email a couple days ago saying if we lose any more games that they are going to call off the drafts in Vegas. They've already postponed New York and Chicago. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. My trip is all booked. I still kind of want to go, but I don't not if I'm not drafting. I
Yeah.
don't know, and I don't know if I would be able to make it back out there in, a month's time or something like that. So that's really heartbreaking. But so yeah, I was just going to kind of wrap up what I'm doing and just sort of spend more time just sitting and looking at stuff and not so much time looking at draft rooms.
Hmm.
I only have one more league that I've already paid for, and that's one more best ball that I was going to do as a fast draft in the next month or so, some point. If things start delaying, I could probably, I might sign up for a few more. It's probably best balls, maybe a draft
Hmm.
champions, but I might just kind of wait it out because, if you don't know how long the season's going to be, how much more money am I really going to invest in this?
I am almost in simpatico with you. Not in the drafts you already paid for, of course. I'm not in those, but my feelings on this, like back in the 60 game season, I basically didn't dump any extra cash into it because I was like, I don't even want to play 60. And I honestly believe we're getting more than 60 games. I'm not going to that detrimental part of the world, but it's the same kind of feeling as towards the end of February, like I wrapped up my DCs, my NFBC 50s. I'm doing like Raz Slam and TGFBI. I'm like, perfect. March 1st, we're going to start doing like OCs and stuff. Let's go. And then like that Monday when all like the Twitter was blowing up, I'm like, sweet, about to start going, and then it stopped. So now I'm just like you. Like I almost signed up for like a DC yesterday, and they're like, no, I'm gonna wait because what if they make a deal soon? I don't want to be doing that long draft. Like I don't want that.
Hmm.
And so but I want to keep drafting to keep my mind right. And it's just like, so I'm 100% with you. I think if by like Monday things aren't looking better, I'll probably jump in something because you just gotta kind of, to me, keep the mind going. But it's tough. It's really tough. But
Yeah, and I'm signed up for, of the 4 drafts in Vegas, 2 of them are auctions, and part of
man,
the reason that
yeah,
I did that is because I really want to draft live auctions. I don't
yeah.
enjoy online auctions as much, although I did have fun in the best ball auction that I did on Saturday. But I really want to do auctions live, and so if things get postponed, I could jump in an online main event, but I don't know that I'm going to want to do online auctions, which is sad.
Yeah, no, and I get it because I told someone that they when you guys were signing up for your online auction, a lot of big awesome people were playing in that league. And I'm like, man, because I've never done the NFBC auctions. I've done other sites and it's just miserable. Like I can't, it goes forever. And I get it. It's tough to do an auction online. It's just very difficult.
Hmm.
But everybody that came out of the NFBC one said it was awesome. Like the interface was great. It went really quick. Like you guys were done fast for an auction.
We
Um,
were. And they
yeah,
also, the one key feature for me is that they don't have a +1 button.
that's big.
It is,
That's
it's
you
if
have
the
to type
current
your
bid is
number.
6, well, you can, but if the current bid is 6, instead of saying +1, it just says bid 7.
Okay, that
And
makes sense
if
though.
if you're doing it at the same time as somebody else, it just gives you a little error message and says you
That's
can't
good.
do it. And it'll go up, then it'll let you hit bid 8 or something like that. But you don't get caught in that weird situation of somebody jumping the bid and then you
Yep.
bid one more, or
I
multiple
hate
people
that.
bidding at the
Yep.
same time and you jump up $5 all of a sudden. So that was really nice. I thought it was good. It's just not the same as
No,
live
seeing
for an
I think I
auction.
can't remember who I was talking with on it, like in on a podcast. It's the online is or in person is the best part about the auction because you can see faces. You can it's like playing poker. Now you're starting
Hmm.
to like because when people just throw out like BS bids, you can after like the third time they do it, you kind of figure out okay they really don't want this person. Like they're totally toying with us, or vice versa, and you can kind of play things. And I like that a lot. So I'm with you there. I hope it works out. I
Me
hope if it's
too.
delayed that you can reschedule because it's a fun deal. I know like when we talked in Arizona how much you liked that auction. You like I think you weren't even like originally signed up for it. You were for
No, I
Super and
wasn't.
then all of a sudden you're like, well, Super didn't fill. I'm gonna go do this. And now you love it. Now you're like, let's go do more. So I
Yeah,
hope it
I've
works
always
out.
loved auctions because my home league is an auction. Well, the first 8 rounds is an auction, but I always loved that part of it. So I wanted to do it, and I would get down to the end of draft prep, and I just thought, oh, I haven't prepared for it. I can't just jump into one without doing enough prep for it. And then last year, kind of forced my hand to do that, and I just thought, you know what, the hell with it. I'm just going to do it. And even though I didn't really prep that much, it was still fun, and I still did pretty well. I finished 1 home run / 1 RBI out of the money in that auction league. So it just kind of whetted the appetite, and I just want to do now this year. I want to do 2. So
yeah, that's awesome though. That's great. That's the beauty of fantasy sports, and I guess that's the beauty of going to the live events. If one doesn't work out, there might be an opening sitting right there, and you can go try something new. I told them, and this year now with everything messed up, it's definitely not going to happen. But I mentioned to Derek, I said, hey, I guarantee you, if you put like some live OC drafts, people would sign up for those, and you might get even more people in Vegas because, for the most part, it's the big dollar events that are in person. So I'm like, if you throw some smaller ones, you might get even more going on. So just an idea.
Yeah, they've had some OCs that were $750, but if they put in like a $350, I think that would do well.
I bet you it'd be quite interesting. So we'll see down the road. They keep listening to the players, the consumers. They keep changing things. So it might not be this year or next year. I guarantee you in the next handful of years, there'll be more options for more things to take place. But as I said before the show, I could sit and talk to you the whole time. But let's kind of let's get to some fantasy baseball stuff here. And the article you came out on RotoBaller with yesterday, Best Ball Strategy, is great. It's a great primer to get people that have not played Best Ball. I think it's really good because a lot of the talk, at least that I've seen most places this preseason, especially on my show, I'm guilty of it, is like DCs, draft and holds. Like that's a ton of the conversation everywhere. Best Ball's out there. It's just not as – it's more like a Fantrax thing. People don't talk NFBC as much type deal because it is a little higher dollar, but it is a great format. So – you wrote a great primer on it. It's easy to understand for dummies like me, so it's great. Why don't you kind of give everybody an idea of what is Best Ball, I guess, and how does it differentiate to those that play draft and hold per se?
Yeah, so Best Ball on NFBC specifically, I don't have much experience doing Fantrax Best Ball. So specifically talking about NFBC, there are 12-team leagues. I should preface this by saying NFBC also has cut lines, and that's a whole different thing that we can talk about if you want, but specifically just their strict Best Ball contests. They're all 12 teams. There's 2 different types. So you can do a double up, which people that play DFS know, out of the 12 teams, 5 actually double their money and 6 gets half their money back because that rake factors in. And then the other one is the BB12. So that is I believe the winner gets like 6.7 times their money back. So basically you pay 150, winner gets 1,000, second gets 300, I believe, and third gets 150. I hope that's right. So I've played mostly in those just because, having to only double up your money or finish in the top half to double your money is great. And it can be a good way to increase your bankroll, especially if you're kind of new to Best Ball. But I want the ability to win and win more money. I want there to be a bigger prize for winning. I don't want to win a double up. I would just feel like I'm leaving money on the table, So I did several of those. I think that last year was the first year for those on NFBC, and I did 6 of them, I think, and I did pretty well on them. I like them. I just really like them because, I know that people like to use DCs for draft prep essentially, but I actually like to use Best Balls because I don't like to pile up too many DCs. I know that there's no fab, but for me at least, I spend a lot of time setting lineups, and I don't have a ton of time. I think to set a lineup properly, you have to put some time in. And I know with DCs, you can get to a point late in the season where you're just like putting anybody in who's healthy. Yeah. But I like to try, if I have options, I want to try and look at them. And especially the way the schedule is now, where on Mondays and Fridays, you have games starting at all different times. You might have an afternoon game, a few at 7, a few at 10, at least Eastern. And, I'm trying to look at like which one of my guys are starting and sitting in that first game of the week and things like that. Like it takes me some time. And so I don't want to do that for more than probably 2 draft champions leagues. So for me, Best Ball is a great way to get in more leagues, get in more drafts, and do literally no in-season management at all. So you draft 46 rounds, 12 teams, and then your lineup is automatically set for you at the end of each week. The highest scoring players, it's a point system. The highest scoring players are put into your starting lineup. Lower ones are on your bench. And you just sort of watch it as the season goes on. And I think it's fun.
Yeah, no, they are a lot of fun. And they, by the sounds of it, similar to Fantrax. Because like I said, I did a lot of Best Ball the last few years. and on Fantrax, and I believe there are 40 rounds, but I made them customized to 50 to kind of give us the feel for the deeper pool. But it was points based. There, the part that really stunk was there was no positional flexibility. Now, does
Yes.
NFBC have the positional flexibility like they do in the
Yes.
regular promo? Okay, that's big.
Same eligibility as in all their other leagues.
Okay.
So that is a big difference if you're going to play one versus the other for sure.
Yeah, no, Fantrax, that was a bummer because you like Cronenworth second base only or something like that. And
Yeah,
that
that's
kind of loses
crazy.
the whole appeal of that
Yeah.
guy. So it changes things a lot in the way you draft because, like, as you know, as you're building your roster per se, you want like X amount of this position, X amount of this position. But if you have the
Mhm.
flexibility, you can kind of count it, like cheat a little and do this.
And in best
Where,
ball,
yeah,
it's that much more important. In draft champions, it's great because you want to have that to be able to choose. But in best ball, the ways that your lineup can be reconstructed to get the best guys into the starting lineup is even bigger. So in that article that I wrote, I put in two identical lineups side by side, and I just changed one. I think I changed Evan Longoria to Jonathan VR. So essentially, I changed a third base only guy to a second and third,
mhm,
or sorry, shortstop and third guy. And if you look at the scoring of the guys on the team, the way that just having that one extra position of flexibility shifted everything around. So like corner went to middle, utility, and it shifted everything, and it made an 8-point difference in scoring just for that week.
it's tremendous.
And if you do that, if you have guys that you can just shuffle all over the place and you can fully maximize getting the absolute best scores into your lineup, it will add up significantly over the course of the season.
And I will tell listeners if you are going to play this, read Jenny's article. But when you go to the NFBC, you can look up Best Ball ADP, so you'll see the difference
Mm-hmm.
of how it gets pushed up. So, like when you're looking at doing research, don't go to onlines, don't go to DCs, go to the one, and don't go to Best Ball Cut Line, go to Best Ball.
Yep.
There are different ones. And you mentioned Cut Line. I had Curtis Jones on 3 weeks ago or something.
Yeah,
He's
that was great. I love listening to that because I
big.
love Cutline too.
It got me so jacked up because, like you said, the best ball's 12, which is great because I love playing like OCs and stuff. Like it's kind of I don't mind 15s, but I think 12's fun because I've said it too many times. But cut lines having 10 teams, like that's like the feels of pretty much anybody that's probably started out a league for the first time years ago. You played like an 8 or a
Mm-hmm.
10 person league. That was just like you had a little group of friends. And you're like, let's play fantasy. Unless you're very lucky, I wasn't. I was probably a 10 team league, and your teams were so stacked when you walked out of that room. And the cut lines, it's pretty wild. But what I wanted to get at is you mentioned point scoring. Is it the same scoring as cut lines, the best balls?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and the difference, I mean, a lot of people have played in points leagues before, and a lot of times traditional points leagues count, especially for batters, count walks. And so you tend to favor a more OBP type hitter than an average hitter. Like somebody like an Aaron Judge or Joey Gallo just rockets up the standings. But the scoring for NFBC was developed, I believe, by Todd Zola.
Yep,
This was for cut line to mimic roto scoring.
yep.
So it's the way that it's scored tends to sort of trend the same way as like a rotisserie ranking. So it's very important to know the differences and the specific scoring when you get into a league like a best ball.
Another great point because those that listen to my fan track stuff in the past, it's OBP centric basically. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a definite different animal when you're drafting, as you said, and that's definitely something good to know as you're getting into those. You mentioned you did a best ball auction recently. Obviously, there's best ball, there's drafts, there's probably slow drafts, live drafts, whatever.
Yep.
How many rounds is it? 23 rounds for the auction, and then you pick the rest of your
Yes.
team later. Okay, cool.
And the
But
difference, which I was preparing for that auction on Saturday, and I didn't think of it. It started at 8 p.m., and I didn't think of it until about midway through the afternoon. Oh my gosh, we have to draft a full starting
yep,
lineup out of the
there you go.
auction. And in a normal best ball league, I don't draft a ton of pitching early. I might
Uh-huh.
get a couple of guys at the beginning, and then I'll wait, because pitching is so volatile that anybody can spike a good start any given week. So I tend to try and fill out my hitting spots first. But then when I thought, oh gosh, I have to have two catchers and 9 pitchers by the end of 23 rounds, that changes the evaluations.
Mhm.
So I went more pitching heavy auction wise than I would have otherwise. But yeah, even just the change from a slow draft to an auction threw me for a loop for a few minutes.
Yeah, I saw a few people talking about that, and I didn't even know that was a thing, that you had to fill out your roster first. Because I'm just like you. It's like I might have like 2 third basemen, 3 catchers before I even have like more than 5 pitchers or something. Like I'm just throwing things out there. But yeah, I'm with you. It's maybe get a couple aces, but you really can just go for volume late. And in best balls, that's usually a decent way to go. Um, Real quick, you mentioned how you would take pitchers later in like a regular draft compared to an auction. Can you explain real quick why that like you don't need so many aces per se in best ball? That it's more about like the innings pitched and accumulation.
Yeah, and in best ball specifically, obviously aces will tend to score better and you'll have more good weeks out of them. But if you just look at, best ball scoring, somebody like Herman Marquez, for instance, if you look at his stats from last year, he'd have a 23-point week followed by a -7, followed by a 40, followed by, and it was just all over the place. And even, very mediocre starters can get you positive points. And really, out of pitching, you want positive points because you're more likely to get a negative out of a pitcher than a hitter, at least based on my own observations. So I just want to have a lot of pitchers and I just want them to be, anybody can, the best 9 will go into your lineup every week. Doesn't matter who it is. Garrett Cole will have blowups and
Mhm.
other guys will have blowups. And the crappier guys will have good starts. So there's not as much of a differentiation, I don't feel like, between the aces or especially that sort of middle tier and the lower tier. So I'll get a couple of solid guys that are more than likely going to be in my lineup every week. And then I'll sort of skip that middle tier, maybe just sort of sprinkle in 1 or 2, and then just wait and get a whole, like usually my last maybe 10 rounds are all pitching because a lot of times the hitting runs out at that point too, which is sort of a separate issue.
Yeah, but no, that's a great point because yeah, the hitting. Well, like you said, most people just go and grab the big boys. The hitting you want kind of that more consistent at bats, where the pitching's like okay, even if I get a guy late, he's gonna make at least 1 start a week, probably. So like I got
Right.
that going for me. Where if you're getting like platoon bats, which is what you're gonna get the later the draft goes, more often than not, now you're hoping they can play 5 games a week, hopefully, but it might be 3, might be 4, and that puts you behind the 8 ball as well. Um, with the pitching, do you even care about relief pitchers?
I think that there's a place for them. So in the NFBC scoring, saves are worth a decent amount, so that's great. And I will take a closer if the values sort of fall to me. So generally, I just take my own projections, just calculate points based on the stats that are projected, and that's sort of a rough rankings for me for a best ball. Um, and if a closer, falls to a place where it's logical to take him with his projected point total, I'll absolutely do it. But once you get past the, what we all think are the sure closers, I don't take the guys that are questionable closers. I'm not going to take like a David Bednar or any of the Seattle. Well, I have taken a Seattle guy here or there, but um, I like anybody that's if a reliever is not getting saves and he's not pitching multiple innings and getting, those that sort of middle of the game win, I'm not so much interested. And even in the auction last weekend, I saw people bidding, pretty significant dollars on the Barlows and, those guys like that. And it's just, I either want the top guys or I want the guys that are going to get volume and vulture some wins.
Yeah, that's a great point because in Raz Slam, I don't think I have 1 relief pitcher on my entire roster. My guy's
I've done
just
that before.
yeah,
I've taken absolutely no relief pitchers at all.
and it makes sense if you break it down because, like you said, saves are worth a lot, but it's a points to the league, and it accumulates, which is great. But how often do closers get like 3 saves in a week to be worthy of more than a starting pitcher per se? Or like that's kind of the whole basis, like Jenny's talking about, is if you want anything, you want the accumulator, you might go throw 3 innings in one game, 2 innings in another, get you a strikeout an inning maybe, and sneak out a win. Like that's pretty
Yeah.
awesome compared to trying to, because if the guy goes out and pitches 2 relief outings, gets 1 save, gives up 3 runs in his other outing, gets only 2 strikeouts, he's probably not going to be in your lineup anyways that week.
Or
So
if it's a guy that we think is going to be a closer, or you know,
true.
like to speculate is going to be a closer at this point, and then isn't, you know,
Yeah.
isn't getting any saves and is pitching an inning at a time, he's probably almost never going to be in your starting lineup unless every single one of your other pitchers just
Yep.
bombed.
And then at that point,
Yeah.
crudite. So that's kind of the basics I had for the best ball questions, because like you could obviously go super deep in player pools and stuff, but I think we've exhausted that previously. Is there anything else you have for best ball strategy advice? Because I kind of want them to read your article too, of course. Is there anything per se that you if someone was going to go try to draft tonight, would you have any like final advice for them?
No, I think, you know, just calculating, you know, the points, knowing the points and how they apply to your individual players. Just take a set of projections, export them, and calculate the points, and you're going to be pretty well off. And then just making sure you get enough hitters at each position. I
Yeah.
usually do 3 to 4 catchers and then 4 at every infield position, maybe 10, 11 outfield, and then the rest pitching. And that actually, I try to get like 20, 21 pitching, which if you add all that up means you have to get a few multi-position guys to make that work. But yeah, you just have to have all of that covered. If you end up with like 2 third base eligible guys, you're going to be taking some bad scores.
Yeah. And that's why that's why the multi position is so great, because you can like cut back on some hitters and get extra pitchers. So if you're taking darts on a bunch of guys like that aren't really that good, I guess the more bad pitchers you have, the more like the better chance you have of at least one being good that week. So it helps out a ton in the grand scheme of things. And I love the fact that they did make it kind of roto scoring, since most of our heads are kind of in that mindset where you can kind of just walk over and do one without having to think too much, because that was always the hard part, doing the Fantrax and coming back to the NFBC and going back and forth. I'm like, in a slow draft, I had to like double check which one I'm in, because it's a totally different animal when you're making your pick, and that's tons of fun. All right, let's talk about your awesome article in the FTN Draft Guide. This, I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. I've heard it in many other places. Amazing article, because I love we all have draft strategy. November, December, January, all the podcasts are talking draft strategy. We are today, but a lot of it's, roster construction is huge. That's a big part of it. You kind of broke down another way to roster construct. Like, one thing that Ryan Bloomfield and I do once a year on podcasts, and it's because he mentioned it like 3 years ago, was really focus on the mid rounds. And in a roundabout way, it's kind of what you're doing with yours. Like, take these picks and then the mid rounds make you do your thing. But you broke it down even deeper than that. So I'll let you have the floor here and kind of explain to everybody in your article. It's essentially about roster construction in the NFBC, but what process do you go through that I think is just genius? Maybe I think it's involving your work background that kind of makes you think that way, or something you said. So like, just the floor is yours. I think it's awesome, and really made me open my mind to different scenarios.
Yeah, so for me, you know, I start out the off season with usually steamer projections are the first ones to come out. So I'll download those, and I personally like to use SGP as my sort of cumulative scoring calculation. You can find that there's a great breakdown of it in the process, and Tanner Bell's website has a tool that will even do it for you. It's great. It sort of takes everybody's individual stats and sort of lumps them into one single score for each player and how well they will actually perform based on those projections in actual roto standings. So I really like that about them. Um, and then it's sort of a two-part strategy. So I'll go through each position and look at where the pockets of what I think are good values are. So, you know, I'll look through, first base. Okay, well, I like these guys up top. And then, out around here in the 200 to 225 range, there's a few guys that I like. And then, there's a few that are sort of down here that I think are a good option for corner infield. And I'll physically, track that in a spreadsheet. So I'll have, columns for the infield guys and columns for the outfield, and sort of put blocks in there of where I think I'm going to want to target guys, because it's easy to say, hey, I like these first basemen that are going in round 15, but I also like these, closer speculations that are going in round 15. And I also like these middle round starting pitchers. And if it sort of helps you realize where you're going to have to make compromises and where you can really target. And maybe I really, really like the first baseman there, so maybe I'll bump them up a couple rounds to make sure that I get them there. And you can sort of see how all the positions line up against each other. So I really like doing that. You can do sort of something similar with individual categories, looking at where, the steals are falling and where the, high average guys are, and sort of pinpoint those as to where you want to look for them. And it's really, looking at where is the last guy at each position that I want to have, and working backwards from there. So that does tend to sort of focus on those middle rounds, where are the cutoffs at each position, and then working backwards up to the front. The other thing that I mentioned in there that I like to do is use Steamer 600. I don't use it extensively, but I think it can be a really good a place to look for values. So I have a table in there looking at a bunch of first basemen, and if they all had 600 plate appearances, how their stats would line up. And there's a group of guys that, go from Jose Abreu all the way down to Rowdy Tellez that will, if given 600 plate appearances, will do roughly the same thing for your team. And that can be a great way to find guys that might be sort of hiding in the projections because they are projected for less plate appearances. And there's probably a very good reason for that. They probably are less likely to get those plate appearances, but it can sort of point guys out to you that maybe you'll, look closer into it and you think maybe they'll get more than they're projected for. Or it can help point out guys that as the season progresses and injuries happen and guys are getting into jobs that they didn't have before, that you see them and immediately know you want to bid on them because you've seen that they can do it if given full plate appearances. So that's sort of a long way of saying, I just sort of like to take the whole player pool and how all the categories and the positions line up. And then I went from there into sort of a flow chart of, if you break down the first round into speed, power, and pitching, and anybody that gives speed, I was putting in the speed category, even if they also have power potential. But then sort of, okay, well, if I take this in the first round, then what does that mean for rounds 2, 3, and 4? Like, where does that take me? And you can sort of map out flows of, if I go speed in the first round, well, then I don't necessarily need to go speed in the second round. So maybe there I take pitching. Well, okay, so I have those two. Well, then what's left in the third round? And what are the power guys like? Do I like them? Do I want to go that direction? Or maybe I don't. Maybe I need to go power in the second round, and then because I like the pitching better in the third round. And it's just sort of a visual way to look at all your different options and sort of think about it ahead of time, so that when you get to the draft and maybe the guy that you thought you were going to get in the first round you don't get, you've already thought through the other options and you know where to go and you don't get panicked.
Yeah, no, that's the beauty of it. I think is, well, is you actually did your research, so you're already going to be much more comfortable going into the draft room with that. You're not just one of those people that prints out the top 380p and walks to the room, which is good because there are those people out there. But the idea of basically planning it out, the flow charts, I think is just genius because it's a visual to kind of like in your head you can go, yeah, I need speed. And there's this pocket here from doing this and this research, but yours literally just has it right there. Boom, boom, boom. If I go here, that's for the first 4 rounds in your deal. Do you go deeper in your research? Do you have like all 20? Like, so you have the whole kind of concept down there?
I don't always go 23 because that's getting,
Eventually you're just,
yeah, ADP sort of starts to fly out the window after a certain point, but I'll usually go like the first 10-ish rounds.
Okay.
And even last year, I did the tag teaming with Rob, when we were on your podcast last year. And we sat for 2 or 3 hours the day before the draft and went through all of the first 10 rounds. And we, got to a point, we had thought, okay, we're going to take a catcher here. And then we get 4 rounds later and think, well, actually, we kind of like the catchers here. So if we take a catcher here, then probably up here where we thought we were going to take a catcher, we could get like Castellanos or somebody like that. And so you end up even changing what you thought you were going to do. And so we had that worked out ahead of time, because with a 1-minute clock with a partner, you got to make quick decisions and you need to be on the same page with stuff like that.
And that's even more the genius of it. Like you said, it opens your eyes up to where, because you'll do it in the middle of a draft if you don't plan it out right. You'll take someone in like round 3 and then even 7, 8 rounds later, like, wait, this guy's still here? Like I could have gone here, and then like whatever type scenario and gotten someone else in round 3. And it happens to everybody. And I do it all the time. And usually it's later in the draft, but you sit there and it'll happen to you once in a while. So I think the planning out part's great, just to kind of run it through your head, get an idea where things go, realize that there's buckets of, Rob loves Babs, which is very kind of similar to what you're talking about. It finds a lot of similar traits of players and statistical categories of players that'll that you can target. And I think it's a really, really good way to look at things, because we can all do mock drafts or DCs or whatever to kind of get ready to learn the player pool. But to actually learn the player pool, I think you have to actually sit down and kind of, like you said, go through it and get your different scenarios in place. For you, for instance, though, just out of preference, when you're drafting, are you a pitcher early person? Do you like to wait on pitching? What do you prefer to do in your drafts?
I have traditionally been a pitching early person. I started doing the main event in 2017, and I've done early pitching throughout my time there. Um, but it's interesting this year. I think the narrative has been pitching is deeper. You can wait a little more on pitching. Um, I'm not sure I totally agree with that. I think that it's easy to look at the list of pitchers this year and it looks great, but you really don't have to get very far down before there's some significant question marks. How far down are we getting before we're on to, Shane Baz and guys like
Yeah.
that who are, questionable playing time, and, guys who have done it only 1 year, and, guys who are moving into new environments, the Gaussmans and guys who are moving into new situations. And I think that if you really want to talk about sure thing pitching, it runs out, after, I don't know, 4 or 5 rounds probably. And it's great, like, to take some shots on that middle tier of guys, but I would rather get at least one and probably two of the earlier guys, maybe skip some of that middle, and jump back in the, 10-ish, 9,
Mhm.
10 round range, something like that.
I think because I'm guilty of saying it's deep. I think what it feels like this year compared to previous years is the group of quote unquote like elite top talent guys is deeper than it's been in the years past. Because like last year it was like 4 guys or whatever, like it was just 4 or
Yeah.
5 guys, and then it really kind of dropped off. Now you can kind of make arguments for, like, you still have the Burns and the Coles of the world, but after that there's still a group of probably a good 8 to 10 guys or something you could make an argument for. Then it does drop off. I think that next grouping is so much larger than it was before. Like, there's so much similarity in that next group compared to years past, where it's kind of like different buckets. You can make like kind of deciding lines between them. Now it's like much more murky, I guess, in the next area, and that's what makes it kind of tough, which also makes more chances for errors as well.
Yeah, I've heard some people say, you can skip that early and get 2, 3 of those guys in the middle. But I don't know who did the research, but I know that there has been research done that those guys in those middle tiers do not hit at a very high rate.
Mhm.
So you need to choose the right ones. And do we know the right ones
Yeah.
to choose? Yeah, I don't know. So, maybe you'll take 3 of them, maybe only 1 or 2 of them work out. So, I think that the hit rate on those middle guys is going to be lower. So, skipping the early guys and just trying to get a few of those middle guys may not work out as well as you hope it will.
Yeah, no, it's very, very true. I'm looking forward to seeing, so hopefully getting to see how the season plays out, because
I know.
there have been some very fun ways to draft with different, like, again, in years past, it seemed like pretty cut and dry on how I'd want to approach the draft. And now it's way more dictating on where I am KDS wise, like way more
Sure.
dictating there on where I'm. In years past, I really had a plan, where now it's like, okay, if I'm here, I have this plan here, that where your flow chart plays out well for that. But where do you prefer KDS? Are you like what Modica says? I just do was it sliced butter or whatever? Straight butter.
I haven't heard that.
Straight
Oh,
butter.
straight butter. That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah. I thought that was a funny, it's typical Modica. I'm like, that is straight Italian, like New Jersey right there. Like just straight up Sopranos style. But yeah, that's all I've done. I've just done the straight put 1 through 15 and see what happens.
I haven't. What I've done so far is put like 6, 7, 8 at the top, then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then
Mhm.
go 8 through or 9 through 15 at the back. Um, it's worked out well in some places and not well in others. There's been times when I've almost always had a middle pick from that. So I haven't had a lot of experience doing the front or the back. I just generally like the middle better. I like to sort of be making a decision more often. But there's been leagues this year where by the time it even gets to 7 or 8, I'm kind of not loving it. And but like in TGFBI, for instance, I got Jose Ramirez at 7.
Yeah, I'm not happy about that, by the way.
So, you never know. I was going with the thought that there's, a good top 7. Hopefully I'll get one of those. I've frankly treated this TGI FBI a little bit more as like a FOMO draft, just trying to get some guys that I wanted to have shares of. So, if I was thinking when it got to me at 7, I might just go Ohtani or go Acuna, and, just try and get some shares. But, hey, I'll take Jose Ramirez. But generally, I like to be in the middle if possible. I'd like to not get caught. When you're on the ends, there's just so many picks between yours that you end up having so many regrets.
You have to reach, and
and even like sometimes I think I'm reaching, and then I didn't reach correctly.
Yeah, well, that's true. Like literally in TGFBI, the picks I made today, I needed third base, or like around 14, and I had 2 third basemen I wanted, and according to ADP, I could have still waited. I still could have waited, but I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. So I took one. Well, the other one I wanted still sat there on the way back. I'm like, so I could have waited. Great, super. But it's tricky. Like at least in the middle, you can be in the middle of a run, so you're not reaching for things or this, that. Like you can go with the flow of the draft. It's so weird. But yeah, if I've had like 7, 8, 9, I haven't been in love with my options in round 1 so much. I haven't been blessed by having Jose Ramirez fall to me. He went.
That was pure luck.
Yeah, I had the 4th pick in TGFBI. He went 3rd, so I thought I'd get lucky and get him at 4. No, didn't happen. And I see you get him at 7. Others got him at 6. I'm like, must be nice. But it's different this year. It's really, really different because in years past I'd put it backwards 15 on, like I wanted to turn, and now it's kind of it's a different beast for sure. This draft season. You mentioned looking at Steamer 600 for valuation. I guess that's a great tool. Do you prefer Steamer projections in general, or when the bat comes out, or ATC? What's your projection of choice?
Right now in my draft spreadsheet, I have ATC in there. I like ATC because it's like a good, safe, middle of the road kind of projection. Doesn't get too high on anybody or too low on anybody because it's an aggregate, so it just sort of builds in that aggregation for you. But what I also do is I run the Fangraphs auction calculator for all of the projection systems, or all the ones that they have. And along with the ATC projections in the spreadsheet, I have the dollar values from all the other projection systems. So I, can have those to refer to. In general, though, I've contemplated maybe I've done a little bit in points of using the Bat X for hitters and Steamer for pitchers. I might modify to that. I haven't really decided yet, but the Bat X for hitters has been really good too.
Really good, yeah. It won, I think, most accurate projections last year for hitters, obviously, because they don't have pitchers. ATC won the year before, so it's obviously very, very good. But it's fun to see who uses what because there's a little bit of everything out there. The statistical targets, that was a point in the article, and we talk about the 80th percentile for so many deals because that'll kind of, if you finish above those, for those that don't know, you basically have a great chance of cashing, if not doing better. How much, like when you're drafting, do you have your spreadsheet out and you put your stats in, or how do you monitor your 80th percentile per se?
Yeah, so I have the targets in a spreadsheet. So I have my spreadsheet broken out per position. I don't have an overall list anywhere. But then I have a separate tab that is for my team. So as I take a guy, I will just copy and paste his projections into that sheet. And then it has, a calculation at the bottom, just adding everybody up. And then I have my targets, and then I have, what percentage of the total I'm at. So, I know that, 7 hitters through, I should be at 50% or really better because your later hitters are not going to do as much as your early hitters. But, so I keep that a tab on that way. But one thing I think that's important to remember to do is when you're calculating the rate stats, I don't just take the average of all of my hitters and average it together. I take the total hits over the total at bats, because that way you factor in the guys that are getting more or less plate appearances or at bats. Same with the two pitching rate stats, so that, the really good rates or ratios that you can get from your relief pitchers don't make you overly optimistic on what your rates are going to be. So I think that's one thing that's important to do if you're going to track your statistical targets as you're going.
That's a great point, because I think a lot of people probably do just like, oh, let's just average these together, and it doesn't quite paint the right picture. So
Yeah.
remember that one for sure. You can add up your home runs and RBIs, that's fine, but don't go the other direction. Now you've got your starting roster, you've looked at your projections, you kind of know where you stand, and you have to draft your bench. Like you said, you just did your best ball bench. You'll do your other benches while you draft. Sometimes you'll draft those before you finish out other parts of your roster, just how the game goes. How do you approach your bench? Because some people like to take their chances because like, oh, we'll just drop them and turn and burn. Some of them like to, get a prospect that they can stash. How do you go about building your bench?
I think that building the bench is something that's really sort of under focused on. I don't know if that's a correct phrase. But what I like to do is have positions covered that way. So, when you come out of fab every Sunday, I like to go into the week knowing that I've got at least two people at every position. And with some positional eligible multi-position guys, you can do better than that. But I like to have obviously, your starting lineup, and then in your corner infield, you'll have either first or third. So if I have a first baseman in my corner infield spot, I want to have a third baseman on my bench or an utility. But just so I have two of everything. Same with middle infield. If I have a second baseman in my middle infield spot, I want to have a shortstop on my bench or somewhere else in my lineup so that I'm covered that way. I want to make sure I have an extra outfielder. Usually I'll have two-ish starting relievers in my lineup. Sometimes I'll have a third on the bench and a few starting pitchers on the bench. I generally don't stash. I try not to anyway. I almost never stash on anybody who's either injured or a minor leaguer. I don't like to limit my bench options. And one thing that I learned from partnering with Rob last year was the idea of streaming from your bench instead of churning those bench pitchers, trying to get a stable of sort of reliable, semi-reliable guys that you can start in good matchups, and that way you can put those guys in and out of your lineup, and you're probably going to be dealing with a better quality pitcher than what you're getting off of the waiver wire. So,
It's true.
looking at matchups and just starting the best out of those 3 or 4 pitchers that are taking up the last couple spots in your lineup, and then a couple spots on the bench. And I think that that's really something that I'm going to try to do moving forward.
That's a great call. Rob's a smart man, so it makes a lot of sense. He's a very, very smart guy. If you guys haven't noticed, the Pull Hitter podcast is back, so
It's
get up on
back.
that. Yep, get up on that. It dropped right before, like I saw it on my feed right before we started. So he's back. Rob is back, and we're glad to have him back. All right, we talked a lot of roster construction. If people have more questions, go with the FTN draft guide. It's awesome, very affordable. Hit up Jenny on Twitter, ask her question. Ask me questions if you want. But I really want to ask some Reds questions because I draft a lot of them every year because the ballpark's tempting. The team, I don't have to tell you, should always be better than they perform because it is usually a good team. And then that ownership or whatever starts to play with it. Like, I think it was 2 years ago, I picked them everywhere preseason for it. And then they just blew. I'm like, oh, what are you guys doing? What are you doing here? And I can only imagine being a fan like you are, because trust me, as a Dolphins fan, I kind of understand a little bit because we screw everything up.
I was gonna say San Francisco. I'm not.
I can't use that excuse anymore. I used to before 2010. I could use that excuse a ton too. Can't do that. But the Dolphins, I always bring that up. It's torture what they do. So I feel like you're good enough, but not good enough every year, and that's what they do. So let's talk Reds from a fantasy perspective, which we can all enjoy. That's always good. We'll start with the reigning rookie of the year, Jonathan India, who was absolutely awesome last year. Started out bad, started out pretty rough. Let's go back to AAA. Injuries got him back in the lineup and just took off from there and led off. OBP skills through the roof, power, speed. What do you guys expect, or what do you expect from India? Are you expecting kind of similar production, more production? Because he was a former elite first round pick from Florida, so people were kind of starting to give up hope on him, and then he kind of proved who he was. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I just got to start this whole thing by saying that another thing that we have to thank MLB for is that I don't actually get to watch the Reds. because I'm in the blackout.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So in this area, the only way that I can watch the Reds is to have Spectrum cable. That's it. That's my only option, and I don't want Spectrum cable, so I don't watch the Reds.
That is garbage.
The station that carries them got into a fight with YouTube TV, and so I lost that. And I thought it would only be a matter of time until they worked it out, and we're going on like 2 years now.
My YouTube TV, we lost the. Oh no, on Dish Network, I don't have it anymore. They lost the local channel for Giants and Sharks and stuff.
Yeah.
But YouTube TV still has it, thank God.
I can't watch Reds, Indians, Pirates at all. The Pirates are like not even, if you live in this area, there's no amount of money that you can pay to anyone to watch the Pirates.
I hate the blackout
not even
rules.
an option.
It's embarrassing.
It makes me crazy. Yeah. But I still do try to follow as much as I can. And as far as India goes, I am a little bit wary of sophomore regression. But in his case, I think he's pretty safe. And I know that something that, Toby likes to say is, a lot of paths to value. He contributes a little bit in all the categories. So I think that there is some safety in that. But, I think he's fine where he goes. I think that, projections wise, he looks to be a slight value where he is. So I've taken him. I've actually taken him as my middle infielder. In a DC, I took Altuve and India.
That's a good combo.
Yeah, I liked that. So I'm fine with it. I'm not like running out to get him, but I think he's fairly safe.
Yeah, I love it. I like him. I'm not rushing again. That's exactly how I feel. I think I have him in I draft enough, so I have him in a couple leagues. But it's one of those I'm not reaching for him, like you're saying. But there's a lot of times I'll see someone draft him and go, "Oh man, like I could have not taken this guy and then waited on India and got him right there and been okay with it." Kind of the flow chart thing. But he's always one of those guys that like you don't really think about him too much until you all of a sudden you see him and you're like, "Oh, that's right, there he is." But I think safe's never a good word, but like you said, I think he's got a very good floor to bring the action, and it's not going to suck with the ballpark, with the guys behind him.
His playing time, I think, is safe. I think he'd have to cut pretty bad before he would lose playing time.
I think he earned the right to have a slump now, unlike last year. Last year, they're like, yeah, go back to AAA. But I think he earned the right now. It's like, hey, he's got some hardware on his mantle that you're going to have to respect a little bit now. Another guy, though, that was, always an average asset, or a problem, but the power was great. And then last year was kind of a hiccup. Still ended up with over 30 home runs, which is great. But Gino Suarez, he's coming off the shoulder injury last year, which could have had a lot to do with it. They had him playing shortstop, which I think had a lot to do with it. That's my personal opinion. You take a guy out of their comfort zone, that's going to happen. He went back to third base, started hitting a little better. The average still didn't really come, but at least there was a little more consistency from Gino. What's your thoughts on him going into this year? Because, if they have Barrero play shortstop, Farmer's going to be moving around. There's going to be some pieces involved in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going with the assumption that he's going to be the full-time third baseman. Maybe they'll put him in DH a little bit. I'm not sure. He's got a profile that a lot of guys have: big power, no average. And so if you want a guy like that, I think that that's a fine choice. I have no idea what Joey Gallo's ADP is, but he's got to be going later than like Joey Gallo, right? I mean, I think of him as kind of the same thing. But I think I've taken him. I think that his dual position eligibility can be really nice, especially because he's got that middle corner combo. The difference between him hitting 220 and 240 is huge. I looked at my spreadsheet where I've got all of the projections dollar values, and all the Bad X stuck out that they've got him as like a $12 player. Yep. And I go to look at the actual projections, and they have him hitting 240. Mm-hmm. So the difference, and if you look across the other stats, they're nearly identical. So the difference between him hitting 240, like some of the projection systems are saying, and 240, like the Bad X is saying, is like $4. And so if you think that he can do it, sure, it's not a bad place to take a shot. He had a great September. Who knows? Maybe he figured something out. I would love it if he did. But if you draft him, you just got to be prepared for that 220, because that might be what you're getting.
Yeah, he's going about 70 to 80 picks after Votto, so that's a plus. I love the middle infield, corner infield flexibility. That's like really, really big. And if you look like the last 2 years, the injuries, the shoulder could have been an issue because prior to that, he actually hit for average pretty
Yeah.
regularly, which was great. That's what made people love him, and then he's kind of disappointed. The one other thing I'll mention, and last year, do not look at last year if you want to listen to me, but prior to last year, if you're like in an OBP league, he goes super late. And he's not the end of the world. Like he's not
Yeah.
great, but he's an over 300 guy with over 10% walk rate most of the time. So you can get him late as a third base because a third base shortstop guy as well, and that's kind of somewhat interesting if you're in an OBP format. But in batting average, yeah, like you said, be prepared. Things could get rocky. Another OBP guy doesn't steal any bases, needs to stay healthy, please, is Jesse Winker. With the concerns of the health because he just hasn't stayed healthy, are you buying in on him this year? Because the price is much higher than it used to be.
I have drafted him. He's another one that I'm sort of not running to get, but I think the best way to approach him is just to be realistic about his plate appearances. Just put in the projections, factor it in that he's going to miss some time. He may at some point get platooned, and if you lower those plate appearances and you still like the value, then do it because when he plays and against righties, he's going to be great. So if that's something that fits what you've done so far on your team, then I think he's a really good option. And you just never know when somebody if he gets that full-time plate appearances,
Mhm.
even when he, is hitting a combo of righties and lefties, his performance against righties is so good that it averages out to be really good. So, if he can stay healthy, he'll be great. You just can't assume that. You can't draft him expecting, best case scenario.
Yeah, I've drafted him in a few leagues because I'm just hoping that he can stay healthy because, like you said, his numbers will be phenomenal if he just stays on the field. He's super, super like he legit could hit 40 plus on runs. Like he's got that ability in him. He's not going like in the top parts of the draft. Anybody won't run at all. So just keep that in mind. But you can get everything else hidden right in front of Joey Votto and Suarez and company, which does not stink. Let's talk Moose. I've been snagging a ton of Moose late in drafts because I love the guy. Like he's just a grease ball. He plays hard. Like what's not like he's having fun. He's always dirty. What's not to like about this guy? Yeah, obviously he hasn't stayed healthy the last couple of years. That's been a bummer. But with the DH, like everyone talks about, who benefits the most on every team. Well, Moose could definitely benefit tremendously from this because now you got Suarez at third, you got Indy at second. His kind of landing spots are getting clogged up here. But if Moose comes back healthy, he's free in drafts right now. Well, are you in on Moose this year?
Well, that's the key is that, the low cost on him make it worth taking the shot. I haven't done it yet. And every draft I see him and go, oh yeah, got to get him in my queue. And then I sort of don't take him and then he's gone. And I, regret it a little bit. I think that, it's possible that it was all injuries last year. I held on to him in the main event all year, all year till, September. And I'm sure I would have done better had I not, but I just thought, he's got to come around, he's going to come around. Didn't. So there was that. But yeah, at this low cost, you can, especially, I think he's a good person having a fab league because draft him. If he's not better, then you get rid of him. So it's, no harm done. So that's probably the way I would approach taking him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm a guy. Everyone talks about the bounce back candidates, and man, we've seen him do it so many times. But
Yeah,
this is where I'd love some spring training people. That would help a lot.
I know. I
Let's
was
go to the
all
pitch.
over him last year.
Yeah, let's go to the pitching side of things here. You got Luis Castillo, you got Tyler Mahle, you got Sonny Gray, all rumored to be traded somewhere. All have fantasy relevance at one point or another. Like I have a ton of Tyler Mahle because I love the strikeout stuff. If he could ever stop walking guys, it'd be tremendous. But I think he could potentially take that next step. I've always been a Castillo guy. I actually don't really have much of him this year. I just haven't. And then Sonny Gray always intrigues me every draft. So, what's your thoughts on these three guys that could all end up in a different uniform sometime this year?
I'm open to drafting all of them. Like you said, who knows who will still be there and who's going to get traded. I don't think any of them getting traded, it probably will only help them. So that's probably not something that I'm going to be too concerned about. I think I'm open to taking all of them at their prices. Um, I don't know. I don't know why. I think I'm just being influenced by the general opinion that everybody's sort of down on Castillo, and so I'm a little bit more down on him, and I don't know why. Is there anything that we know about him this year that we didn't know last year? I
I'm
mean, he
with you.
had that
I
bad first
completely
half,
agree. Yeah.
but we could have all probably seen, a slow spot coming for him. So I
Yeah.
don't know that he's really any different than what we knew before. So, maybe he's a good value at where he's going, depending on, what you've taken up to that point. I wouldn't want to make him my first starting pitcher, but second or maybe even third. Third would be nice. I like Mahle. I think Mahle is probably my favorite of the three at his cost. I've also drafted Gray a few times. He's a good bounce back candidate. The interesting thing about all of them is that the Reds became a good spot for pitching when they brought in some new pitching coaches. They brought in all those driveline guys and stuff like that. But now those guys are gone. So I don't know. Hopefully these guys can take what they've learned from them and hang on to it. But who knows? I don't know honestly enough about the pitching staff that's there now, the coaching pitching staff. So I don't know if that might affect the overall performance of the Reds pitchers.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the concern I have is especially with like Castillo. You make such a great point. Is I was all in on him in the last couple of years, and I don't know, nothing's changed. You're 100% correct. Nothing has changed. Yeah, he had that bad first half, but he finished phenomenally. One of the best pitchers in baseball in like the second half of his season. So what's the deal? And hey, they talk about people that are going to benefit from a month off or something. Well, there goes your cold weather narrative. So like if it is a
Yeah.
cold weather thing, there you go. Like problem solved. So
I never totally bought into that in the
no, I
first
don't
place,
either.
though.
I don't either.
It's
Like
not
some
that cold. I mean, it's not that cold
no.
in
You guys are gonna be
April in
like
Ohio.
almost in the 80s this weekend. He's fine. That's
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's I don't think that's what it is some guys are slow starters. They need a little extra oomph to get going. It's just the way it goes. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Like I'm a big Mole guy just for the strikeouts, if anything, and see where it goes from there. I think he could, like I said, he's young, could take that next step. But Sonny Gray, people like keep talking about him, and I don't know why. I've always been kind of hesitant at times, but doesn't give up loud contact. Like he really does a good job of limiting damage, and he's kind of a I don't know, like I'd have to look at the numbers. I'm really just spitballing here. He feels like a poor man's like Jose Barrios. Like it's not
Yeah,
flashy.
he's just oatmeal. He's
Yeah,
just not
he
exciting.
eats up innings. He'll have some like these starts, get you some strikeouts, but nothing that jumps off the page at you. So in reality, probably a good fantasy guy to have, just because
Mhm.
you don't have to worry about him. You just plug him in and let him go. Let's talk about some of these young pitchers, though. You got San Martin, you got Santillan. You can throw Ladello in there if you want. These are all guys getting talked about. I have a lot of San Martin and Santillan late in draft, just as spec shots there. Are you seeing any need to draft these pitchers? Do you have any like thoughts on who might actually be worth it this year? What's the buzz around these three young arms?
I've taken San Martin a little bit. He's had such a small sample last year that it's, obviously the numbers look fantastic, but it was a super small sample, and he has two starts against Pittsburgh. So take that for what it's worth. But if he did look good in those two starts, um, I think that these guys might be a good place to take a pitcher, take them late in a fab league, drop them if they're not doing well or if they lose their rotation spot. San Martin is somebody who relies more on deception than velocity. So that can go either way.
Yeah.
It could be great, or he could just crash and burn. So I wouldn't want to be hanging on to him in a league that doesn't involve fab, I don't think. Santillan, I don't know if he's going to be a starter. I think right now on roster resource, he's not listed as one of the 5 starters. Vladimir Gutierrez is. And Vladimir Gutierrez, if you look at, I just downloaded Gino Suarez's stuff numbers and all that, and
Mm-hmm.
he looks better with stuff and location and pitching plus and all that than Santillan does. I think for a lot of these guys, either you draft them late and you drop them, or you just sort of watch and wait and pick them up as a streamer if they're looking good.
Yeah, I know Gutierrez. I streamed a few times last year. Sometimes it worked out well. Sometimes he had some blowups. That was his deal. But yeah, that's it's interesting to see what they have there. And if they do make some of these trades, some of these young arms are going to get some serious looks to finish out the season. So worth, like you said, keeping an eye on. You have the watch list buttons and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely something to think about. And last but not least, if you can look inside your crystal ball, because not many can figure this one out, is it Lucas Sims or what are we doing with the closers in Cincinnati? I thought it was Lucas Sims last year. He got hurt and then got shuffled around to like 12 guys. Where do you think we go this year? Shuffling again?
Probably. I'm just staying away fantasy wise. You could take a shot on Sims. I would want to do it someplace where I can drop him though. So I don't think I have any Reds relievers on any of my teams yet. I'm just not interested in playing that game. We have no idea that they're going to be any more interested in having a single closer than they were last year. So they could just end up being some, guys who mix and match. And so they're not worth rostering. So I'm just staying away unless I hear anything concrete from the team.
Yeah, no, it's been a tough one to go to draft for sure. And like I love Lucas Sims. I think he's freaking awesome and probably should be the closer. But yeah, tough go there for sure. It'd be nice if they still had Mr. Iglesias. That'd be nice. But maybe not. All right, couple listener questions here, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. Anthony Gialdi, he asks, for best ball, do you wait for pitchers or take them early and look at it as a point of separation from other teams? So you said you take pitchers usually later, but is there like a specific strategy you'd like to mention to him for that?
Yeah, I think what I mentioned a little bit earlier. I'll take a few early to try and get some, stable base, and then just wait because there's so. I mean, like guys like San Martin, Santillan, Vladimir Gutierrez. You can have those guys if they're getting regular every 5-day starts, could spike plenty of good enough starts to get into your lineup. So I think that it's so much more volatile than the hitters that I just try and have lots of them, and I'm fine with taking them late and just getting the hitters that I need to get.
All right, Gialdi had a second question, but it's the same. It's one of the same questions Bill Hammock has, so I'll combine them. Basically, what's the best way to approach, or how many catchers? Best way to approach catcher? How many catchers should you have in a 2-catcher best ball league?
I usually have 3 or 4. If I spent a little more on them, I might get by with 3. That's sort of where I'll take a hit if I need to on getting a 4th one. If I didn't get maybe enough multi-position guys and I have to lose a spot somewhere, I might make it catcher. But I like to have 4. I'm willing to spend a little bit on catcher. If you look at the points values, the points, you can get negative points as a hitter. Basically, it's the way that they calculate batting average. So you have -1 per at bat. So if you have a low average catcher who's not getting any counting stats, they're likely to have a negative score for that week. So I'm willing to spend a little bit more on catchers. I've had a couple shares of Sal. I've had, a couple shares of Real Muto, guys like that, or even those middle guys are fine too. But I try not to go just total bottom of the barrel on catchers, but getting 4. You can also, if you really want to wait, get, sort of do a handcuff thing. If you think that it's a clear handcuff. One thing I did last year that was a huge mistake was I took 2 Detroit catchers thinking that I was handcuffing, and ended up with neither of them. Neither of them ended up being the catcher for most of the season. So that can blow up in your face. But I've also done it with like Christian Vasquez and Plawecki, guys like that. If you have somebody that's kind of a clear backup, you could do it with, I've done it in that auction. I have Omar Narvaez and Severino,
Okay.
Things like that you can do. And that'll allow you, usually that second guy, Severino's a higher end one, but sometimes that second guy is, nobody has really any interest on them other than the person who drafted the starter. So you can use that to spend a little bit later on catchers if you want to.
Like I like your option better with Narvaez and Severino, but I think last year with the Angels, I did like Stassi and Suzuki or something like that, where it just kind of gives you that buffering effect if you're not going big. But I like you. I kind of like spending up if I can at that position because the drop off so severe at catcher compared to other spots that it does make a big difference. Bill's other question: is there any track record, maybe in the past that you played, that a heavy hitter approach is better than a heavy pitcher, or vice versa?
Yeah, that's generally what I try to do. So what I'll do is look at where the quality hitters run out. where are you getting down to guys who just are, short-sided platoon guys and, just not going to play enough to matter. And I'll sort of mark where those guys run out and try to get all my hitter spots filled before that. So I'll generally have pretty much all my hitting spots, maybe without a few outfielders left, by round 32, 35, something like that. And then just take pitching after that, because I think having quality depth of hitters can be very valuable.
No, that makes a ton of sense as well. But Jenny, that'll wrap us up. Final thoughts on anything we talked about today, how you're going to keep prepping for drafts. We are going to have baseball. We are going to have baseball. So we got to keep positive there. Just when is the question. But any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, they need to do it soon. I don't want my Vegas drafts to get canceled, please. I know this is selfish and people's real lives are on the line, and they, people's livelihood. I want the players to get what they need, and if they have to hold out, then I get that they have to do that. But please just make it work in the next week or so. I can't take it.
Because the problem is, like I said it on a lot of shows, is the players are fighting for the players that don't have money, the young players. So that's what's making it tougher. They're doing that while those young players are actually at spring training right now, which is very ironic. So that's who they're fighting for. And in the end, people seem to already get ready for it. The owners are going to win again. They always do.
I know.
Like there might be some nice concessions towards the players, but in the end, just be ready for it. The owners are going to win again. Like the concessions will be way better in their favor. Let's put it that way. Like, so just be prepared for that, because we've seen the pitchforks on Twitter. Yeah, I know you've seen them. We all have. Just be prepared. The owners will still win this. That's just how it's going to go. Because eventually the players will realize we have to play baseball. Like that's why I know we will have baseball, but because both sides need money. That's just the way it's going to go. But one side can kind of outlast the longer a little longer. So
they're just going to wait just long enough to inconvenience all of the fantasy community.
Pretty much. That's what's going to be. Or we get like an awesome late April time in Vegas, towards like, I don't know. I'm just trying to make up a good scenario. I have no idea. But all right, we'll wrap it up there. Make sure you check out Jenny on Twitter at Jenny Butler 830. Her work over at RotoBaller.com, Fantrax HQ, and the FTN Draft Guide. And Jenny, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
No problem at all. Everybody, this is Bench with Bubba, episode 444. Catch you guys.